We are here today at Miss Opal Lee's home, and we are doing an oral interview on the on Miss Opal Lee and also the a little history about Juneteenth. I am Jabari Jones, a librarian with the Fort Worth Library System. And so my first question, Miss Opal, is kind of just get a little background about you, where you're from, how long you've been in Fort Worth. Uh, I hate to always had to ask a lady her age, but your age as well.
Well, listen, I just flaunt my age.
Okay.
I'll be 92 in October. And I don't know how far back you want me to go.
I would say, I guess coming to Fort Worth.
Okay, I was 10 when my mother brought me to Fort Worth. My dad had come earlier to find work. And so a year or so later, we joined him here in Fort Worth. And that was in 1937.
Where were y'all coming from?
Marshall, Texas.
Okay.
I still call Marshall home. Isn't that ridiculous? And I haven't been there in 80 years.
So y'all came in 1937 due to your father's employment?
He had come earlier
Okay.
seeking employment.
Okay.
And so my mom sold the only car we had for transportation on the train for us to come to Fort Worth. And we settled on the west side, Summit Avenue and El Paso Street. My family had friends who lived in service, huge house that was actually a medical library, and in the rear were the servant quarters. So that gentleman and his family, Mr. Powell, his wife, and 2 children, let us come and stay with my mom and 3 children until we could find a place of our own. So I went to a little school called Cooper Street School that was in that neighborhood. And would you believe later I taught at that school?
Oh, wow. So same school that you attended, you at later years taught there. Okay. Now, was this the I guess a predominantly black school or just
No, this was the neighborhood where we lived
Okay.
was whites only, except for the servants who lived in there. But to the west was a city dump that that there was a school for coloreds in that area. It was called Trezevant Hill back in that day and time. And the school was later, the name was changed to the principal, Amanda F. McCoy. But before that, it was called Cooper Street School when I went there.
Okay. Now, where did you attend high school at?
I am Terrell.
I am Terrell. So that was the only school that you could actually attend at the time?
That's the
For high
only school we had. I am Terrell for blacks to attend.
And what year did you graduate from there?
1943.
1943. Okay. And then after leaving I Am Terrell, what were your next steps, or what were your next goals?
Oh, you want me to tell you?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, finished high school, married so quick would make your head swim. Was married 4 years and 4 babies when I decided that I wasn't going to raise the husband too, which would have been 5 children. So I cut my losses and took my children and went home to my mother, tears meeting under here, because she was really disappointed because I didn't go to college after high school. I would have been the only grandchild my grandparents had of their 19 children who would have gone to college. Well, after the marriage didn't work, I took those kids and went home to Mom and said, I'm ready to go to college now. And she looked at me and says, I've got no money to send you to college. And in the next breath, she said, I'll keep your children. So I worked like a Trojan to get the money to go to Wiley College in the fall. Okay. And guess what I did? Took the money and bought a television so my mom wouldn't have to run all over the neighborhood looking for my kids. I went to Wiley College without a dime. They put me to work at the college bookstore. had to get through in 3.5 years. I didn't have time to go 4 years. So I still had a job in Fort Worth, and my mom would work that job during the week. I'd come up and work it on the weekends. And then I still had the job at the college bookstore. So, like I said, I got through in 3.5 years.
Oh, wow. So you finished in
40, let me see, what if in 50, 51 or 52.
51. Okay. Okay. So you end up actually going back home. So
Yes! And I had a cousin who was the bookkeeper at Wiley, and I'd go to her house on weekends too sometimes, and, you know, do the cleanup and whatever, you know, had to be done for her. She never had a child. Dressed to the nine. That lady had so many pretty clothes and shoes, and we wore the same size shoe. I'm telling you. Ooh.
So that's a blessing.
It was.
So then after 51, after graduating from Wiley College, then you returned back to Fort Worth on a full-time basis.
Yeah, and you need to know that you did student teaching. I think my degree was in education. And on the college campus, you could go to the high school for a couple of hours, you know, do your student teaching. I begged to come to Fort Worth to do my student teaching. Told me I couldn't come. My professor said no. And the reason was there was nobody to supervise me. Can you believe that? I'm grown with children and I got to have a supervisor. So I kept worrying them, and they finally said, yes, you can do student teaching, but you have to be in that classroom all day long. I took it. I did.
So where did you do your student teaching at?
Gwen School.
Gwen,
Oh, Gwen School, because when I left Cooper Street, then I went to, because I was only at Cooper Street maybe 6 weeks before my parents found a place on the south side, Tucker in Tennessee, 1200 block. And so I went to Gwen School. And so I did student teaching at Gwen School.
Okay. So after student teaching, you went into, did you remain at Gwen after that, or did you go to
No, I didn't. In fact, I couldn't get a job. I kept calling and calling to, you know, get an interview. I worked, and finally, I got this interview, and I'd been calling, and I was sassy. I said to the superintendent, when they called me to say that I had the interview, and I said to his secretary, what do I have to do now? Bring my brass band? Seeing as how I'm just getting an interview, you know. And that's what he greeted me with when I had the interview. Did you bring your brass band? I told him no. I thought it was advisable to leave them at home. So I got a teaching position, and it was at 9th Ward School. That was in here in Fort Worth. Would you believe they made a prison out of it since then?
Oh, wow.
And
Now, where's the 9th Ward School? Where was that located?
it's in Greenway Edition. Do you know what Greenway Edition is?
Not familiar with that.
Well, it's off of 35. You take Carver Street exit.
Okay,
Would get you
yeah.
down in there.
I know where Carver Street.
Okay.
Okay.
So after I got this position because I had gotten a job at Convair. Hello. You know, I was the maid. Had a lot of maids at Convair. Okay, so my mom and the kids attended graduation. I had this job at Convair. Then I got the teaching job. And the lady at the third door from me taught at that same school. So she'd give me a ride to school in the morning from 8 to 3. There'd be a car waiting for me. I'd clock in at Convair at 4. And I think I'd still been doing that, except they laid me off at Convair.
Oh. So you were doing double duty.
Had to, with 4 children. And then, I decided I didn't have to have a husband. I could get everything my kids need myself, And so you don't buy 4 pair of shoes, you buy 8, You don't have sense enough to get one bicycle and they share it. You get 4. And so, I needed 2 jobs.
Okay. So you remained for teaching. How long did you teach for? I guess, how many years?
Oh, I was actually in the system about 25 years. I taught 3rd grade so long. I taught 3rd grade so long that I was beginning to act like them 8-year-olds, so they gave me another position. I was a visiting teacher. But it wasn't teaching, it was social work. If a child was out of school, it was my responsibility to see why and to alleviate that. If it was shoes and clothes, or the electricity was off, or they need housing or whatever. That was my responsibility as a visiting teacher.
So visiting teacher was 25. Well,
I did about
25 years. Or?
Yeah, I did about 15 in the classroom and 10 as a visiting teacher.
So which one did you prefer the most?
I like visiting teaching. I was all over the place, Yeah, and I like alleviating circumstances, and I like interacting with the parents more than when I was teaching.
So would you say was that part of your? Because I know you've been very active in the community for many years. Would that be part of that precursor to that?
I guess so. Because I'm still reaching out to people that need a house. I'm forever trying to find a place for people to stay, or jobs for them, or whatever comes up. Food. Ooh, you don't want me to tell you about the food bank, do you?
Feel free. Feel free.
Well, I was going to a food bank on Yuma Street. No, that's not so. The food bank was in an old lumber company at Missouri Street, across from St. Andrew's Church. And I was going there for food to take to somebody who needed it, and I ended up on the board. A young lady came in for food for herself and her family, and we hired her off the spot. And she was dynamic. She moved us from that lumber company location, because people would go in on the weekends. You'd think they had a can opener, because the building was made out of tin, and just take the stuff. So she acquired a facility off of Yuma, which was the old Jack's Beer Company. And that's where the food bank was. And she was, like I say, really dynamic, and was doing a great job there, except before it was over, the thing, I don't know. I'm saying that I think it was drug related, because she got to the point where she wouldn't do what the health people would tell her to do. So much so that they turned her into the Attorney General.
Oh, wow.
And she didn't have gas to go to Dallas, where the Attorney General was. She had run all the other board members off. I was the only one there, and the only reason I was there was because I was going to continue to take food to the people I was taking it to, regardless. Okay, we get to the Attorney General more than one time, and she told the Attorney General that I was the chair of the board. Well, I was only a member of the board, and she was the chair, and she was the secretary, and she was the treasurer, and she was the this, that, and the other. And one of those visits, she told the Attorney General, she's not the chair of the board. And the Attorney General said, you represented her to me as the chair of the board, so she's the chair of the board. Well, I got busy and got me another board. Okay, and we tried to work with her, let's work this out. And as the old people say, she wouldn't gee-haw. That means she wouldn't. So we terminated her. And in a week or so, the place burned down. You know, started in her office, but it was a mess. Well, we continued to work, and the place directly behind my house, I would, perishables, they'd put it in their refrigerator for me, and I continued to take food to people in my wagon. And we didn't have a building as such, but they had that building up there for sale for $1.3 million. Oh, wow. And I asked, and they leased it to us for $4,000 a month. And I chafed. We ain't gonna get $4,000. We ain't got that kind of money. But we actually sold the other place as is, you know, burn out and all. And for 1 year, we paid that $4,000. And the month we didn't have the $4,000, the owners came to us and said, "We think you're doing a good work, and so we're going to give this facility to you."
Oh, wow.
$1.3 million. Oh, I could have done a holy dance right then and there. I'm not there any longer. It services 500 families a day.
People still located behind your home?
Uh-huh. It's a huge facility.
Oh, wow.
Oh, huge. You might have to look at it when you leave here.
Oh, I'll definitely do that.
So, that's food bank. I still deliver food. I got 20 clients. Some of them mental. Some of them can't get to the food bank for one reason or another. And so the first of the month, I take 10 boxes, and the 15th of the month, I take another one. 10 people, boxes.
Oh, wow. That's great. Great work. And because I know you've been very active and very involved in the community, so
Well,
that's a plus to be able to do that and still do it. So I guess my next set of questions is going to be, I guess, a focus on Juneteenth. We're coming up on Juneteenth celebration, and I know that you have a Juneteenth celebration that you do for the city of Fort Worth, and not probably just for the city of Fort Worth, but for everyone.
yeah, all this area.
Yeah. So I guess kind of find out what the purpose of educating people, so we can educate people on the history of Juneteenth. Speaking to yourself, what is Juneteenth and what does it mean to you?
Well, I don't even know where to start. The fact that slaves in Texas didn't know they were free for 2.5 years after everybody else, after Lincoln's proclamation. And Gordon Granger, General Gordon Granger, went to Galveston with his troops. And he had General Order Number 3 that he read to people, except I don't know how many he read it to, because them folks was working and in the field. So he nailed this order to the door of Reedy Chapel AME Church. And so when the people came in from work and somebody read it to them, they started celebrating, and we've been celebrating ever since.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, celebrations take different turns. The festival is off the chain. And it gets better every year with the parade and the 5K and the breakfast of prayer. We start with the breakfast of prayer just to thank God that we aren't in that position anymore, and to thank Him that even if the climate is not right now, that it doesn't happen to us again. However, people have shackles on their minds. If they have to have Nike shoes and big cars and big houses and not see after the education of their children, that's slavery. And then there are other forms of slavery that we still have with us. However, we've got Empowering You, where we have health component and teach you, at least show you things that you can do to empower yourselves. And that's at Tarrant County College on the South Campus.
Okay.
We start our parade at ODY, and then we go to the South Campus for the festivals and for all the other activities, except one. We've got one at the Trinity River campus, and it's an honors banquet. And you do remember Irma Johnson Hadley. It's in her honor. And we've chosen maybe 5 people in the community we don't think people know a lot about or recognize. And one is a rector, and her name is Hughes. In fact, she's Coach Hughes' daughter.
Oh, okay.
She's the rector of an Episcopalian church. And then we've got Norma Roby, who is an entrepreneur. She has Yellow Rose concession stands at the airport. And we've got Phil Wygan. He's an activist and somebody who's into education and tries extremely hard to get the Fort Worth and the Dallas independent school districts to work and help and acknowledge the children who have disabilities. He's wanting them to interact. Those children go to Dallas to the zoo, ride the train. The ones from Dallas come to Fort Worth, and those kids interact. So he's one of the recipients, and the other is Judge A.Y. Collins.
Okay.
So that's one of our activities. And
Okay. So when was, I guess, because you came to Fort Worth in 1937. So when was, I guess, the very first time that you or your family actually celebrated Juneteenth?
celebrated in Marshall.
Okay.
But at that time, there wasn't a lot of celebration. We celebrated at home, but an actual public
So
Juneteenth,
was it not celebrated in the community, or just more so just the homes?
more or less in the homes. What happened was Dr. Marion Brooks and Dr. W.H. Wilburn, and I'm not sure who else, went to Marshall and got Professor Melvin Brooks to come to and talk to a group of people in Fort Worth, you know, to give them the significance of Juneteenth. And from that, it was revived because before my time, down North Main Street, which used to be called, that bridge used to be called the Paddock Bridge, on, I think it was the right, was a Frederick Douglass Park.
No, okay.
Yeah. And people were dressed to the nines. They'd have their picnic baskets and their parasols and decorated wagons celebrating the 19th of June. Well, I don't know how long after that they celebrated, but I know after Dr. Banks came and talked to blacks in Fort Worth, there was a resurgence of Juneteenth. Then it went down again. But then Dr. Brooks's wife, Jap Jones, Henry Masters, and some others revived it. And we had 30,000 people in Sycamore Park in a 3-day period, 10,000 a day. It hasn't happened since. But that was a festival, you hear? Mind you, I think Juneteenth has to be more than a festival, but hey. And so when that group had put that together thinking that they would help, funds they raised would be able to help other little nonprofits, but putting on the show, they didn't make any money, and they sort of, yeah. Well, the Black Historical Society, Tarrant County Black Historical and Genealogical Society, took it up. Jap was a part of that group. And when he decided he could no longer work with it, I took it, and that's been over 40 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they've been celebrating as far as the Juneteenth festival that happens now has been going on for 40 years.
Over
40
40,
years, okay.
yeah.
Okay. And is this but it's just migrated to other locations because it stayed in Sycamore Park for a long time?
Yeah. We did Rosedale and Evans. We did downtown at the convention center. We had a parade downtown, and the people asked us to bring it back to the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so we've done it. We got a little Juneteenth museum at the corner of Evans and Rosedale. Looks like the hind heels of hell, but when you go inside and the curator, who's Donald Williams, tells you what this is, plants he's got out there, which came from Africa, he gives you a tour, you know. Like I say, don't look too cool, but, you know.
But it represents for that time frame.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that reading on a lot of your history, you were actually involved with just more than just a celebration of Juneteenth.
Yes, indeed. I'm adamant that people learn that slaves didn't free themselves. It took abolitionists and Quakers and blacks and browns and all kind of folk to get that done. And would you know that in getting the word out, I've learned there's a Quaker congregation in Fort Worth. They don't have a facility, but they meet at University Christian Church, and we've been invited. In fact, there's a letter my pastor has sent, and we've distributed, asking as many congregations as we can to come to that breakfast of prayer. You know, and I'm not wanting them to sit next to each other and smile and shake his hand, and that's the end of it. I'm wanting these people to get to know each other, you know? I really hope that we can do that at the breakfast of prayer. Now, breakfast of prayer doesn't mean you're going to eat a lot of food. It's eating the words from the Bible. And after the service is over, about an hour and a half, then we can go to the fellowship hall, and we'll have food aplenty down there for brunch or lunch or whatever you want to do.
Okay. So I guess my next question will be more so, what is the importance of making Juneteenth a holiday?
A national holiday? If 45 states recognize it as a state holiday, that ought to be enough to make it a national holiday. And so, would you believe September the 1st, 2016, I kept telling people we ought to do something. And so a group of people got together, and we had some music, and County Commissioner Brooks spoke, and my pastor did a beautiful prayer, and the music was fine. And I stepped off from the steps of that church with people with me and started walking to Washington, D.C. And I got Fort Worth and Arlington and Grand Prairie and Dallas and Box Springs and Joppa when my team said, no, it's not going to be like that.
So you're not going to walk anymore?
No, not going to walk no 1,400 miles. The point being, you will only do the walk where people invite you. And I was invited all over the place. And I'd simply do 2.5 miles in the morning and 2.5 miles in the afternoon to signify, you know, that we didn't get the word for 2.5 years. And I went to Shreveport, Texarkana, Little Rock. I went to Denver, Colorado, and Chicago and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was all over the place. I was having a walking good time.
So when did you, I guess, first start trying to make it
A national holiday.
holiday?
There is an organization, a national Juneteenth organization that is headed by Dr. Ronald Myers. And Dr. Myers is Baptist minister. He's medical doctor and a jazz musician all rolled into one. And so this has been going on a long time. In fact, he collaborated with Hutchison. What was her name? She was in Congress. And she wrote the bill.
Okay. Kay Bailey Hutchison.
Kay Bailey Hutchison wrote the bill. It simply didn't pass both houses. And at this point, all we need is a proclamation from the president to make it a national holiday. And we've done some of everything with the signatures, with the walking, for all kinds of things to get people aware that it needs to be a national holiday. And we're talking about like Flags Day or President's Day. Just recognize it. You know, we celebrate the heck out of the 4th of July, but slaves weren't free on the 4th of July. My contention is we ought to have a celebration from the 19th to the 4th. Hello. Now that would be that would be next to Mardi Gras. That'd come first, you know that?
So, I guess, and one of my follow-up questions will be, have we lost the history of Juneteenth? What do you think? If we have, what do you think we need to do to get back to it?
Listen. Of course, I think the schools and the churches and the other organizations put more emphasis on it. You know, there's a book, and it's by Dr. Charles Taylor, and the name of the book is Juneteenth. And I know it's in Fort Worth Public School, but I don't know how many copies. I don't know how many copies in the library. I think there just needs to be more of an awareness of the sacrifices that were made and the fact that we should be able to unite behind a common cause of unity. You know, you've seen people with straws. You can break one, but a whole lot of them you can't bend. I don't know if that's getting over to you or not, but I'm saying that together we can do a lot more, a hell of a lot more than we're doing right this time.
So, and I'm gonna probably end with I guess, what would be the takeaway that you would like everyone to see from Juneteenth?
That we are survivors, that we continue to survive even though we don't have the resources, we don't have the health components that we need, we don't have the educational components that we need. There's just so much that we need to address, and we don't need to bicker. We need to unify to do this, and I'd like to think Juneteenth would be a unifier. Hey, we've come so far. Sure, we got a long way to go, but we could do it together.
Well, Ms. Opal, I would like to, on behalf of the Fort Worth Library, thank you for doing this oral interview. I'm sure that we will have more information or more questions for you to come.
Well, I'll answer them if I can.